Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I am excited to be doing a review of the second book in the Wheel of Time series, The Great Hunt. Now, being that these books are so massive and my memory is so terrible, I have decided to do these book reviews in a different way. I am about 200-ish, I'm 273 pages into this book. And there's been some really interesting things happening. And the way that I usually do book reviews is I'll write down my notes, but a lot of times by the time I finish my book, I don't really understand what a lot of my notes mean. So while I'm reading these books that are quite big, I'm going to start doing my reviews in 3 parts. I'm going to film before I start reading. I'm going to talk about what I expect or my thoughts on the series so far. I'm going to do a review halfway through the book, talking about all the points that I'm sure I'll forget, what their notes mean by the end of the story, all the things I want to touch on because they're great. And I will finish the review with my thoughts after I finish the book. So this is the first part. This is me talking about some of the points that I am sure that I'll forget about and really don't want to forget about. So let's get straight into that. I just wanted to bring up 3 things. I'm actually at chapter 18. If you're reading this book, this will contain spoilers because I'm sure if you're watching a book review for the second book in a series, you either want to hear someone talk about it, spoiler in depth, or you're a crazy person. I don't know. So this will contain spoilers. There are 3 big things that I want to bring up. Specifically, I want to bring up how, and spoilers, you are warned, I'm going into spoilers. I want to bring up the incredible way that this book is pushing characters into their character arcs, or what I perceive to be their character arcs, because obviously I don't know how this story ends, so I can only see it as perceived character arcs. And specifically, I'm talking about Rand and being the dragon, or the Dragon Reborn, or whatever that's meant to mean, and Perrin with the whole Wolf Brother thing, and how he's been trying to avoid, looking at people in the eyes because he can be recognized by the golden eyes he's got, and how all of his friends are starting to notice more his golden eyes. And I just wanted to comment on the fact that the way that Perrin embraces his Wolf Brother gift or curse, or however you want to look at it, I guess he would consider it a curse because anything to do with magic and being a guy is considered tainted and evil, and he's got so much to do with the Aes Sedai, or the magic women. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, but it's how I'm going to say it. And if he's discovered to have anything to do with, the power that's tainted with men, he will be gentled, which is a fate worse than death. So it was really interesting how the author made Perrin embrace his gift by having the tracker that they were using to track the horn and Mat's dagger disappear into that other world. So the only hope that they had to find this horn, which was, incredibly important, and Mat's dagger, was for Perrin to embrace his gift. He was put into the position where he had to decide, is it more important that I remain hidden and hide this gift of mine, or is it more important that I find this horn that will summon this incredible army that will help us fight the bad guys? And especially once that bombshell is dropped that this army of returned warriors or whatever isn't going to fight for the side of good. It's going to fight for the side whoever blows that horn. So now that the bad guys have it, suddenly they have just got an epic boost to their numbers. And if that wasn't enough, on top of it, he is then the only person that can save Mat's life by helping them find that dagger. So I really wanted to bring that up because I thought that so often the way that people, I talk about it all the time, the reluctant hero trope, the way that people don't want their gifts and then finally embrace their gifts are usually really just watered down and just not great, right? They're done in really just dumb ways, people don't want to embrace their gifts because they just want to be normal, right? But for Perrin, he doesn't want to embrace his gifts because if he does, he's going to get gentled or killed. But he knows that he has to embrace it in order to save the world and his best friend. And the same thing goes for Rand. I'm really impressed at the way that they did the same thing with Perrin, but with Rand in regards to becoming the dragon, because basically it's everything to do with Perrin, how like people are going to want to kill him, people are going to want to, this, that, or the other, and it has these incredible ramifications against him. But he begins to embrace it. And it's done in a more subtle way for Rand because people start to see him as a lord. And the whole time he's saying, look, I'm not a lord, don't call me my lord, I'm just Rand, I'm just a guy, I'm just a dude, I'm a shepherd, I'm nothing even close to a lord. But then once they go into that other world, that dream world or that parody world or whatever it is, suddenly Rand lets the tracker start calling him my lord, because he knows that although Rand hates it, it's better for this tracker to believe Rand is a lord, because it will keep morale up, it will keep his spirits up, and it will allow Rand to help this person as best that he can. And I just really wanted to touch on those points before I went any further into this book, because I would really hate to forget that. Just the subtle, nuanced ways that they are going and changing and building their character arcs, or what I perceive to be their character arcs. Really, really well done, and I am honestly so excited to see what happens next. I cannot believe I've spent my whole life without ever reading this series. Why is this not talked about more? I'm really thoroughly enjoying it so far, and I'm only 1.5 books in. But also, I just want to say, before I go any further, Celene's evil, right? Like, does anyone not believe that Selene is evil in this book? Like, that is my prediction. But I feel as if it's like too obvious. I feel as if that's too obvious of a prediction. So I have a feeling that she is going to be presented as evil, but secretly be good, or secretly be working with, the Aes Sedai or whatever. I feel as if she's presented too obviously as evil. So I have a feeling that she is actually going to be good, just to like flip your expectations. Because if she's like meant to secretly be evil, she's the most evil character I've come across. So anyway, that's my thoughts from halfway through the book. So I guess we will now jump straight into my thoughts towards the end of the book. Maybe I'll be in this shirt for continuation purposes, maybe I'll be in a different one, and I'm sure the lighting will probably be different. Anyway, see you in a second. So I have just finished The Great Hunt. Can we just take a moment to just appreciate how phenomenal this book is? Like, it is not every day that the second book in a series ever is better than the first book in a series. Like, how often does that happen? How often does the second book in a series, or the second movie in a series, or anything, how often does it happen that it outshines the first one? If you can think of any examples of that, I would love to hear it, because off the top of my head right now, I cannot think of a single one. Except for this book right here. Holy crap. Usually when I finish a book, I will give it a day or two to marinate in my head before I start doing the review for it. But I just finished this, and I was like, I gotta talk to someone about this. And that's where you come into this. Holy crap. How good is the last, 100 pages of this book? Like, so much happens in this book. I was thinking back to, where it started, and I was thinking back to the first 100 pages of this book and how incredibly slow it was. It's just kind of like Rand, he's walking around, they're just kind of living their lives inside that castle. And then you think to the last 100 pages of this book, and there's, the Aes Sedai that betrays Nynaeve and Egwene and Nym and the other one, Elaine. Then they get collared, and then they do a big kind of Ocean's 11 thing to try and get her out of it. And then there's Rand, and there's the part where they blow the horn and all the heroes come up, and then they're like, do you have the banner? We need to ride under the banner. And then the big battle happens, and then Rand faces off with the devil or the Dark One, whatever. It is just so intense, and there's just so much going on, and there's so many moments where, as the reader, you're just like, yeah, this is so cool. I loved this book. I thought it was fantastic. And I can't believe how much happened in it, which seems like an odd thing to say considering it's like 700 pages long. But so much more happens in it than I thought would happen. The girls go through the ways, Rand travels through like that teleportation stone or whatever it's called, and he does that twice. There are some betrayals, there's a hell of a lot of character growth. So much amazing stuff happened in this story, and I can't believe I spent so long of my life without ever considering picking up this series. I'm 2 books in, and I already love the hell out of it. But I do have a couple of questions. First of all, what do you think about Rand beating the Swordmaster? I don't remember the guy's name, but he's the guy that has the boat captain, and like the boat captain's telling him the stories, and they go there and they get the horn from him, just to jog your memory a little. He is a Swordmaster, and he's got the Heron. I believe he's got the Heron-marked blade, just as Rand does, and they have a duel together. And as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I'm aware, Rand does not use the one power while he's fighting that guy. It is purely just a battle of skill. Now that begs the question, do you think that it was deserved? Do you think that Rand should have been able to like 1v1 him? Because that other guy must have been a Swordmaster to have that Heron-marked blade. Whereas Rand, although he trained with Lan, was not a Swordmaster. So I would love to know, people that have read this, do you think that that felt earned? Do you think that felt cheap? Do you think, it was silly? Do you think it was good? I would love to know what people's thoughts are. And usually I would Google it. Usually I'd Google, Lan beat what's his name in a sword fight, good or bad. And then, you'd have a whole bunch of discussions would pop up. But as people that have read this series will tell you, never Google anything from the Wheel of Time because you'll just get heaps of spoilers. So I cannot Google it to find out what the general opinion is in regards to that sword fight. Personally, I loved it. I thought the sword fight was cool. I actually, in regards to talking about sword fighting in general with this story, I do actually really like the way that sword fighting is described. I like the way that the sword fighting isn't described as like, Rand, he deflected the blow by tilting his wrist, and he did this, and he thrust, and he slashed, and he, whatever. I like the way that the sword fights are described as the forms that Rand trains in, like locust hopping off of corn into moon rises over duck, or whatever. I like the fact that the sword fighting is described through those forms, because it does make it seem professional, and it does make it flow because it doesn't get bogged down in too much detail. It's quick and it comes across as professional. But that's just my opinion. Obviously that isn't for everybody, but I feel as if with my imagination I can imagine, the forms or whatever he's doing. Something else that really caught my attention about this book is just how much more expanded this world is becoming. It's becoming huge. There are so many different factions. There's like these people coming across the sea. There's the Aes Sedai. There's the Game of Houses. There's the White Cloaks. There's general civil war. As well as, on top of that, there's, the Dark Friends and the Trollocs and all of that good stuff. And one of the things I really liked about all of these different factions and the people coming across the sea is I like the fact that they made them so unique. I liked the fact that, they have their own animals that they bring to war. Because that's so true of regular history. Different places had different animals that they would take to war. So it only makes sense that in this story, people coming across the sea would have access to different animals to train and bring to war. So I thought that was a really well thought out, really awesome point to bring into this world. I also like the fact that there is so much uncertainty in these stories. I like the fact that you never know who is going to be a dark friend, you never know who is on which side. I still don't know if the Aes Sedai are meant to be good people or bad people. At some points in this book, this is going to sound stupid unless I've picked out a plot point and a massive twist ending that I wasn't meant to. But a lot of the times when the Dark One is talking to Rand, especially towards the end. Actually, you know what? Maybe I can find the actual quote. So this is on page 664, in case you're interested. This is when Rand is having the final showdown with the Dark One. And he says, "You pitiful wretch, you have sounded the horn of valor. You are linked to it now. Do you think the worms of the White Tower will ever release you now? They will put chains around your neck so heavy you'll never cut them." Now, I know it might sound silly, but there's a lot of times when the Dark One is talking to Rand, and he's actually making a lot of sense. And I was just thinking, what a plot twist it would be if the Aes Sedai were actually the bad people, and like the Dark One was actually the good person, but through the manipulation of storytelling, they were able to spread the word that he was the bad guy and they were the good guys. Obviously, I don't think that's the case because this is like classical fantasy, and that is too much of a modern fantasy trend to go into a classic fantasy story. I say that now, but I'm probably going to look, if it turns out that is the plot twist, that'd actually be really funny to watch back on this video. But anyway, I like the fact that you don't really feel like you can trust the Aes Sedai, even though they're meant to be like the good guys. And then once the girls get betrayed after they go through the ways, it really does reinforce that, hey, you can't trust anybody. You don't know who's on your side. You don't know who's a dark friend who's going to stab you in the back. I'm also really starting to come around on Nynaeve. If you watched my last video and if you watched my review I did of the first book, I talked about how much I didn't like Nynaeve. I thought she was a wet blanket. I thought that she had too much of an ego, and I just wasn't feeling her. But in this book, I did really start to like her when she was getting punished at the White Tower, when they were like taking her down a peg because someone said something mean to her, so she like hit him, which is very Nynaeve of her, but then she got punished for it. Whereas in her life, at the Two Rivers town, if someone spoke to her and she didn't like it, she would hit them, and then that was it. She was like the most important person they had around, so like that was it. She was like the top dog. So I liked the fact that she was being humbled. I liked the fact that she was being punished for things. So I was really starting to like her at the tower, but then after they get betrayed and she starts to take that leadership role, I really found my stride in liking her as a character. I really found that once she hit that leadership role, I was like, yep, I can get behind this person. I understand her character now. I can like this person. As long as she gets like humbled a little, I'm on board. Tom Merrilin, I called it. I knew he wasn't dead. I was like, there's no way this guy's dead. I called it. I knew it, but I gotta tell you what, I'm a little disappointed with how he came back into the story. You know how like Rand just finds him in a tavern and they like talk for a little bit and then they just kind of like break and go their own way. But then like how his story ends is pretty epic. That's pretty cool. So I have a feeling that maybe Tom Merrilin will become a bit more of a bigger part of the next stories. Hopefully, because I mean, he's a good character. I like him. It'll be really interesting to find out his backstory, because I have a feeling he's not just a gleeman. I have a feeling there's more to that. Something else I wanted to say was, I have a feeling that I'm missing so much when I read this story, because there are so many names, there are so many places, there are so many, words that like you have to try and keep track of. And I feel as if I'm missing a whole lot of foreshadowing. Like, I feel like for my first read through, I am picking up enough to understand and to know who's who in the zoo and to like really understand what's going on. But I feel as if there is a lot of things that I'm just like, my brain will see it and be like, okay, that's not an important name. Don't worry about it. Throw it away. And it's one of those things that makes me really think that a reread of this series would be fantastic. And to really already understand everything that's going on so you could just see all the subtle, nuanced foreshadowing and detail put into it. I have a feeling that on your second read through, you would just have such a better time. I did have one pretty big issue while I was reading this story, though. I will say that while I was reading it, it was so easy for me to get lost in my own imagination. And one of the things I want to mention is I can really understand why so many authors quote this series as being an inspiration for them to either be writers or for their worlds that they wrote. And I can really see why, because while I'm reading these stories, I'm constantly thinking about the books that I want to write, or the books that I'm currently writing, or the books that I've already written. And this book really inspired me to become a better writer. And I don't know if that sounds dumb to say out loud, but I can really understand why so many authors would peg this as their inspirations for either their worlds or to become a writer themselves. Because it is so easy to get swept up in this storytelling and so easy to get swept up in this imagination. And I'll just mention one more thing and then I'll end this video. I think I really figured out why I enjoy this series so much. The Witcher was one of my favorite book series that I've ever read. I love The Witcher. I think it is fantastic. But The Witcher has a lot of flaws to it. It's fantastic, but it has flaws. This story to me feels something along the lines of The Witcher and Stephen King merged together. And if you've ever read a Stephen King book, then you would know that the way Stephen King writes his stories is he writes just a whole lot of just mundane, everyday things that happen. And you're reading it and you're like, oh my god, this is so just boring. Okay, yeah, cool. Old mate gets in his car, he drives to work, he goes to work, he gets in his car, he drives home, he eats dinner. Okay, cool. Oh, he does the same thing the next day. Oh, and he does it again the next day. Cool bananas. And you're just kind of like reading through it like, okay, yep, cool, I get it. But then all of a sudden, all of this like crazy stuff will start happening. And you're like, how did this go from going like at a 1 to all of a sudden being a 10? That's to me what this story feels like, but it also feels like it's telling you the Witcher story, which is just an incredibly interesting story with great characters. And it feels like a Witcher story, but with added elements like horror, much better world building, more magic systems, a deeper plot. You know, it feels like they've taken one of my favorite series of all time and just like really ramped it up. And I'm so happy that I came across this series. Anyways, guys, I hope that you liked that review. I probably would have had a lot more things to say and a lot more, eloquent, intelligent things to say as well. But I did just finish this book and I really wanted to talk about it. Please comment your thoughts down below, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I should hopefully have the next review up in the next 2 weeks, depending on when I get the next book from the library. Check out my reaction to Daniel Green's video. I'll also be doing another one of them probably next week. And as always, thank you very much.